A very good morning to our esteemed participants for today's national webinar on creating a green campus. Before we start with the program, we'll all raise ourselves for the national anthem.
जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता। पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्छल जलधि तरंगा। तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा। जन गण मंगल दायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता। जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे।
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So, I take a pleasure on behalf of Bharat Friends Association, Bharat College of Arts and Commerce as an I2SC coordinator. I welcome all the principals, participants, our college team for organizing this national webinar on creating a green campus. Bharat College of Arts and Commerce, established in 1991 by our founder principal, late Shri T.V. Swarupa. This is the first degree college in Badlapur, as well as the first NAC accredited college. We have also completed our second cycle of NAC with B grade. It is our vision of our principal and our management long back to have an eco-friendly campus, and we do have an eco-friendly campus, for which our in-charge principal madam and management has always supported and spent on having an eco-friendly campus. On behalf of every one of us, I welcome all the participants for this national webinar on creating a green campus. Today's time, good health and pollution-free environment is very important for all of us, as we have understood since last 2 to 3 months. So I take a pleasure in saying that going green means to pursue knowledge and practices that can lead to more environmental friendly and ecological responsible decisions and lifestyle, which can help to protect environment and sustain its natural resources for current and future generation. With these few words, I welcome you all the esteemed participants for this national webinar on creating a green campus. Now I'll request our in-charge principal madam, Dr. Neetu Kapoor, to please highlight the importance of this program. Madam, over to you.
Thank you, Farida Madam. Good morning, one and all present for this national webinar. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome all my dear colleagues and friends for this national webinar, Creating a Green Campus. We all know that 5th June is celebrated as World Environmental Day by United Nations. This year, the theme itself is Celebrating Biodiversity, declared by United Nations. We all know that the year 2020 began with environmental crisis, revealing itself in a disturbing manner. Wildfires ravaged tropical rainforests as if they were arid savanna and the Australian bushfires. Cyclones and flood washed away trees and buildings. Now locusts attack across Africa and India, and the coronavirus pandemic. All these calamities act as a reminder that human health is linked to the planet's health. So to make to create an awareness of how we can save the environment, how we can create our environment green, that can help us to grow and live safely on this planet Earth. With this aim, we actually decided to have this webinar on creating green campus. That was one of the vision behind having this webinar, and the second vision, which we all know, in this pandemic COVID-19, we all are at home, but we are all busy working. Either we are working for NAC, or we are working for our self-improvement, or we are working to develop e-content. So everywhere we are trying to upgrade ourselves, and we are still on working in a different manner. The NAC has given us, under NAC criteria 7, talks about how we are protecting environment, how we are conserving it, and how we are contributing in making it more safe. That is what we are all looking for it. And Roshni madam is one of the apt person who have agreed the invitation to be the resource person for today's day. I thank her for her acceptance to be the resource person. Let us understand how we can be safe in the environment where we live. COVID-19 has definitely created this social distancing, but after this, definitely we have to go back and create green environment so that such pandemic never occurs in future, and we remain safe in this biodiversity and value each and every environment of nature, as we are made of Panch Tattva. The balancing of that Panch Tattva is very important. Let us learn this today. Let us upgrade ourselves on this issue today. Not only this, I take this pleasure to inform you all that we also had an competition, various competition on World Environment Day. And I'm happy to announce that we had received more than 150 entries for this competition. So it gives me immense pleasure that at least COVID-19 has given us an opportunity to think and rethink what has to be done under this pandemic 19 and after post pandemic 19. So I again take this pleasure to thank you and welcome you for this national webinar on creating a green campus. I would also request that please type your questions relating to the webinar, any doubt, any queries on the question on creating a green campus, and the moderator will take up the questions, and at the last we are planning to have a lot of question answer discussions. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity and being a part of this Bharat family. Thank you once again, and welcome for this drive of creating a green campus. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, madam, for your insight on this program. Now I'll request Professor Gopal Chanchlani to please introduce our speaker for today's webinar. Gopal sir, please.
Thank you, madam. Good morning, one and all. This is Assistant Professor Gopal Chanchlani from Department of Commerce of the host college. I feel immense pleasure to take privilege of introducing resource person of today's webinar, Creating a Green Campus, Dr. and Architect Roshni Udyavar Yehuda. Dr. Roshni Yehuda is an architect, academician, and environment consultant specialized in energy and environmental design of buildings. Dr. Roshni Yehuda has completed her PhD in resource management from SNDT University, Mumbai. She is a qualified master trainer. She has been honored with the position of empaneled expert on the Energy Conservation Building Code, that is ECBC of India, awarded by Bureau of Energy Efficiency in February 2015. From June 2003 to July 2017, that is for almost 15 years, she was head of the Rachna Sansad Institute of Environmental Architecture where she initiated several environmental projects, and she also introduced and head of a postgraduate course on environmental architecture. As a writer and a professional, she has numerous articles and writings to her credit in various journals and books. At the 34th International Conference on Passive and Low Energy Architecture in 2018 at Hong Kong, she has received a Best Paper Award for one of her paper entitled as Assessment of Thermodrain System on Thermal Comfort, a study of office building in Nashik, India. At present, Dr. Yehuda is president of Institute of Environmental Architecture and Research, IAR Mumbai. She is director of Roshni Udyavaran Association.
Hello. Gopal sir.
A devotion and passion for profession can be judged from the fact, this is the last line I am going to read for introduction, that she has more than 20 years of academic and professional experience, and she has traveled to more than 20 countries for professional presentations, lectures, and study programs related to sustainable development in 20 countries. So we hope today we will be enriched with her specialized knowledge and will be able to create a green campus in our colleges and society. So with the permission of charge principal, I request Roshni madam.
Good morning, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, madam.
Yes, madam.
Okay. First of all, a big thank you to Bharat College, the principal Neetu Kapoor, and all the team and management of Bharat College for organizing this very timely seminar conference on Green Campus. And I'm pleased that a lot of people have joined in. And I hope that I will be able to give everyone a vision of what all can be done in a green campus. And hopefully all of this will be, all these ideas can be implemented in everybody's place. So with that, I think I will put on my screen, and if I can share my screen.
I request every participant to please switch off your video, put off your video off.
Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, madam.
Okay, so I would like to first start off with being architects, what we believe in, because there is so much of buildings and campus that we see that we need to actually have a different approach. And here I want to start with what we believe in. We believe in a design approach that aims at enhancing the quality of life of the people who use the space. That is why we have eco spaces, optimization of environment and natural resources. We believe in a climate sensitive and climate responsive approach because every climate requires a different type of building. So climate sensitive approach, reducing the ecological and carbon footprint of inhabitants, and providing comfort, whether it is visual comfort, thermal comfort, indoor environment quality. All of this is what we believe in, and ultimately making our spaces sustainable in the long run and resilient. And it can be applicable at all scales. It can be applicable to your interior space, to your exterior space, to a neighborhood, to a community, to a building, to a bioregion, to the whole area, you know. So there is no limit to where we can apply all these concepts. So ours is a team, it's a multidisciplinary team of architects, planners, academicians, ecologists, botanists who believe in this concept of eco spaces. And we are committed to providing context-specific sustainable options for people. Some of the things that we do includes architecture, interiors, energy efficiency, environment, including large-scale planning, macro planning, capacity building, and also something that is called rendezvous with nature, which means doing activities in nature and experiencing nature. So today's title of the talk is Creating a Green Campus, organized in collaboration with Bharat College of Arts and Commerce. And what we are going to see is I will try in this sequence to talk to you about giving you a little bit of background about what is a need for a green campus, what is a green campus, giving you an overall vision. And everywhere I will try to give you some case studies, some examples of how this can be done or how this has been done by us. And then there is some part of whatever I explain, and I will also go through the NAC, significance in NAC. What is the process for doing this? That is the green audit itself. The final report, that is feasibility, compliance, commissioning, and actually implementation. And then after that, monitoring, communication, training, capacity building, so that it is sustained over a period of time. And I want to start with this particular slide. As Professor Kapoor has already mentioned, today is World Environment Day, and the United Nations has talked about biodiversity as the theme. But they are now calling it, past COVID-19, because of COVID-19, they call the theme as Time for Nature. Because we are seeing everywhere that nature is reclaiming the spaces that, you know, without human beings, without human intervention, what can happen? We as human beings in the last few hundred years have caused so much change in the ecosystem. So the food we eat, the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the climate that makes our planet, this is what the United Nations says, habitable, is all comes from nature. Each year, marine plants produce more than half of our atmosphere's oxygen, and a mature tree cleans our air, absorbing 22 kilos of carbon dioxide. So all that we do, in fact, of putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere by burning carbon, by burning trees, by, you know, generating electricity, which is the major cause of CO2 release into the atmosphere, is all being absorbed by these trees. These are the ones which are actually saving us. Biodiversity is the foundation that supports all life on land and below water. It affects every aspect of human health, providing clean air and water, nutritious food, scientific understanding and medicine sources, natural disease resistance, and climate change mitigation. Human actions, including deforestation, encroachment on wildlife habitats, intensified agriculture, and acceleration of climate change, have pushed nature beyond its limits, and it would take 1.6 Earths to meet the demands that humans make of nature each year. In the context of COVID-19, the emergence of this disease has underscored the fact that when we destroy biodiversity, we destroy the system that supports human life. Today, it is estimated that globally, about 1 billion cases of illnesses and millions of deaths occur every year from diseases caused by the coronaviruses. And about 75% of all emerging infectious diseases in humans are zoonotic, meaning that they are transmitted to people by animals. So nature is sending us a message. Now, this is, I want to show you this particularly from the context of India, which is a developing nation. And although we are per capita carbon dioxide is low, our overall carbon dioxide emissions are increasing and our carbon footprint is increasing on the planet. We are fourth today in the world and increasing by leaps and bounds. So in terms of climate change, which is one of the major changes that are being done by us, we need to do a lot in terms of mitigation. We have the time, we have the resources because we are not yet there, and we can do the changes, we can think of the correct technologies, we can think of the way by which we can reverse many things which many of the developed nations are not in a position to do. The World Meteorological Organization's latest report on the state of climate change says that the concentrations of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere hit a record level of 407.8 parts per million in 2018 as compared to pre-industrial levels of 300 parts per million. This is huge jump, and this has led to an increase in temperature all over the world. Not to mention that more than 26% of the ocean has become acidic, and as a result there are so many changes that are happening to the environment. There is unpredictable weather, there is increase in precipitation, and so on and so forth all over the world. So when we talk about buildings, when we talk about the built environment, what are the impacts? In terms of global greenhouse gas emissions, today we are the largest contributor. 30 to 40% of total greenhouse gas emissions are from buildings, 1/3 of global energy use. All the materials, 40 to 50% that go into making buildings are the cause of global impact. 12% of water, and that does not include the water that goes into materials. Solid waste, 25 to 40%. So this is the contribution or the impact of buildings. The built environment is next only to agriculture in its impact on the Earth's ecosystems. If you look at these two graphs, and I just want to show it very quickly, just to give you a background, India's primary energy consumption, you can see the first graph, 56% is still from coal, no matter how much we're talking about renewable energy, etc., etc. So that means that we are still a huge contributor to carbon dioxide by using coal as a basis for our primary energy consumption. And if you look at the second graph, the buildings are one of the major 30% of consumers of energy. So we can do a lot by reducing our energy consumption, plugging our fossil fuel emissions, by making our buildings more energy efficient, by replacing the sources of energy to renewable energy, and so on.
Hello. Yes. Ma'am, you are not there on the Telegram group.
Hello, Roshni madam. Hello. Hello. Roshni madam, you are not audible.
Roshni madam.
Rushali madam, can we
Madam.
call her?
Yes, I'll call her.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, okay, ma'am.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sorry the disruption. I think I will again need to share my screen.
Yes, yes,
Yeah. So can you see the screen again?
yes, yes, madam.
Yeah. So there is a change in the kind of classrooms that are there. Earlier we had a different type of classrooms, and now the whole setup, there is a changing phase to the Indian classrooms, and this is going to make us rethink about how we design and how we make these buildings and their entire campuses. So let us look at what is a green campus. So the vision for a green campus includes various aspects. One is energy management. This includes a lot of things which I will try to explain in a while. Water management, solid waste management, visual, thermal, acoustic comfort within and outside the buildings, indoor environment quality, pollution abatement in case there is a requirement, looking at vegetation and biodiversity enhancement in the campus premises or even within the buildings if possible, and overall reducing the carbon footprint of the building. So let us start with looking at a few things. I'm not going to elaborate on everything, but as many as possible with some case studies. So let's start with energy management and what can be done with respect to energy management. So the first thing that we can think about is the building itself, how it can be retrofitted. The word retrofit means that an existing building, some parts are changed in order to make the building more efficient. You would be surprised to know that roofs of buildings which receives the maximum amount of radiation, it can cause about 25% of cooling inside the building can be lost from that if it is not properly designed. If you have, for example, too much of glazing, and that too glazing of a poor quality, like the regular single glazing that most buildings have, then a huge amount of heat can come in, and then you will be putting on fans and air conditioning systems in order to make your building uh, cooler. So that is where you are going to spend a lot of energy first in making the buildings cool. And then of course the walls, we don't have proper quality walls, then uninsulated walls. These are all lead to making the buildings inefficient. So building envelope includes the roof, the walls, the windows. If these are properly designed, or these can be retrofitted if required, then they can contribute up to 15 to 20% of energy reduction of the building. So that is the first part. The second part is lighting, HVAC, that is air conditioning, and other equipments. There are many of these lightings. For example, now everybody is shifting to more efficient lighting. So, but however, we still a lot of places we find old 40-watt tube lights, which are inefficient, the T12s and so on. So these can be replaced with more efficient lighting. You can have sensor based, you can have controls, you can have most of the day lighting, so that you do not require in a lot of artificial lights. You can replace over time the HVAC. Your air conditioning system may not be working as it was supposed to, and therefore you need to check that and improve it, monitor it over a period of time. And also the other equipment that we use in different types of schools and colleges are also causes for so all of this is the second part, where we have the scope of reducing your energy bills, increasing your energy efficiency. So once we do the envelope and the equipment, the third thing is to see if we can introduce renewable energy. That is solar energy mainly, because that is the easier thing to be done. Other forms of renewable energy will require a little bit more thought, but in some places solar wind hybrid has also worked very well, and that can also be tried, especially in case of large campuses, to have a battery backup, and then you can have this kind of system. So this is in a nutshell what energy management covers. But what is important for us as designers is also that, okay, you make the building energy efficient, but is it comfortable for the inhabitants? Do they sweat out when they sit in the classroom and they cannot concentrate on the lecture? Or do they need more light? Do they need to put on the light all the time because there's not enough daylighting? Or is there too much of noise coming from outside? So visual, thermal, and acoustic comfort is as important as energy efficiency. So I want to give you one example of what we had done for a college in Mumbai. We had retrofitted it for achieving both thermal comfort and energy efficiency. And I will just show you what was the case in this. The 6th floor required a retrofit, and we introduced the following items. For example, dry wall. Dry wall is a hollow wall which can be used instead of a solid brick wall. We introduced high albedo paint, which reduces 50% right away of your solar radiation coming onto your roof. We introduced a radiant barrier, which is, no matter how much heat is falling on your roof, it does not radiate it inside the building. We introduced rotating turbo ventilators, which helped the stacked ventilation. Unfortunately, the whole building had on the top a false roof, which prevented any movement of air. So we facilitated that air. We opened up the spaces. Then we introduced various kind of lighting. So, corrugated translucent sheets and polycarbonate sheets so that the light could come in, so that there is no need of artificial light. In terms of spatially rearranging, we removed the false ceiling, we increased the windows so that there is cross ventilation, and we provided stacked ventilation by removing the false ceiling. So this is how the building looked like. Initially, it had a false ceiling, brick wall, and so on, and there were internal partitions, and we changed it to this. So, there is a stacked ventilation, cross ventilation, there is a reduction of heat from the roof, which was the main cause of discomfort. And this is a cross section of the roof, which shows you a very important factor I want to point out here is the figure 4.64 watts per meter square Kelvin. That is the U value, or the thermal transmittance of the roof earlier. And what we were able to reduce it to was 0.03. So that meant a significant drop in the heat coming inside the building. So these are some pictures before and after, how we managed to open up the spaces, how we managed to create more light and ventilation. Not rocket science, but simple things that could improve the acoustic and thermal comfort and the visual comfort inside the buildings. So this is a view of the classroom. What we were able to achieve, we measured it. We always monitor our projects. So we measured pre and post retrofit within the same kind of outdoor temperature and humidity. What was the difference? And we found that there was almost 12 to 13 degree difference in the roof bottom temperature, which is significant because that will overall reduce the mean radiant temperature and provide better thermal comfort to the occupants, apart from the other things that we achieved, that is the light, natural lighting, and so on, which has many benefits. The second example of retrofit that I want to show you is that of the Empire State Building, which you must have all heard of. It was a building built during the 1930s depression, and it used as much, it was a very, very energy guzzling building, as you can imagine, a tall building, and had many, many issues. It was a very iconic building, but it used a lot of energy. So just an energy retrofit was achieved here by Rocky Mountain Institute. And what they did here, if you can just see the various things at the bottom that were done, but important thing, if you can see just the building windows, there were 6,500 windows of the building that were replaced. And that led to a decrease. So you can see there is a stepwise sort of reduction. So as you make the envelope more and more efficient, the less air conditioning you require, and the overall about 38% reduction was achieved in a building of that kind, just by doing a good retrofit. So You can see the building here, the 6,500 windows were changed from single glazed to triple glazed, and that achieved a lot in terms of making the building efficient. I talked about visual and thermal comfort. So I quickly want to show you that thermal comfort has already been there in our traditional architecture. If you see verandas, courtyards, sloping roof, these are all part traditional elements, and these have scientific principles because they have stack ventilation, night sky cooling. All these are principles that we have already used. And if we simply adopt them in our modern buildings or open up these things, we can achieve the same kind of thermal comfort. The second row of pictures here shows the shading devices, which was introduced by an architect called Le Corbusier. He used this large shading devices called Brices Soliel, or the concept of solar chimney, or the wind scoop that are used in traditional buildings in Iran. And on the bottom, what you can see are the modern transformations of these principles used in modern buildings, the wind tower and the trom wall, the geothermal cooling, which helps the building to cool naturally. So all of these technologies try to use zero mechanical energy, zero or next to zero mechanical energy. That means less and less energy. The building by itself is designed in a way that it doesn't consume energy. And on the right hand side, you will see here something called thermo drain, which has been experimented. This is a building, a commercial building done by architect Sanjay Patil, and Panisha engineers, Mr. Surendra Shah, has worked on the thermal, on the cooling system. So it is a natural cooling system. There are pipes inserted inside the building in such a way that almost the entire cooling requirement of this building is met through passive means of water circulation in the slab, and there is no air conditioning system in this building, and yet the building remains cool by just this system. These are pictures of when the pipes were being laid out, and post that when we took the measurements, and you can see the results. This is what I want to show you. If people believe that we still always need to rely on air conditioning, no, that is not required, because in this system you have 10 times less than the conventional energy consumption. So the cooling energy consumption in kilowatt per hour is less than 10 times. The capital cost is 50% of the conventional, and the energy cost, which is a recurring cost, is 8.7% of the conventional. So you can see the life cycle cost, if you take it for 10 years, is 1/5 the cost of a conventional. So why wouldn't all buildings be designed in this manner, so that you do not require, or you require very minimal air conditioning as a backup only? So we have covered thermal comfort. I've shown you an example, and now I want to focus a little bit on daylighting and visual comfort, because this is also a very important component, not only daylighting, but also artificial lighting. How we design this, or how sometimes we have windows and we have seen that they are blocked with some things, we, not realizing it, not consciously done, but in many of the buildings, we find that the very source of light and ventilation have been closed permanently or are not allowed. So our job in this retrofit is just to look at these things and increase these, because natural light not only has a positive effect in terms of the use of less artificial light, but also it has a positive effect on your psychology, and you're able to, work more productively in a place which gets good natural light. So lighting power density, for example, how much artificial light you're using per square meter of space, all these are important. And if you can introduce lighting controls such as photo sensors and so on, those are also part of things that can be done. Here I just want to show you that light wells, for example, light which not only comes from the walls but also from skylights, how you can introduce them. And they have been introduced in some of the buildings, and they have the capability of making the building live providing good daylight penetration inside the building. In some buildings, for example, I recall that the cement house in Churchgate, uh, while making it into a green building, they actually opened up the core of the building and provided a light well and made the whole office into an open space. So much of light and no artificial light began to be used. So here, so that was about what you can do about visual and thermal comfort. And the third aspect of energy management is use of efficient lighting and equipment. So you can replace, maybe in phases, all your lighting which is inefficient, going from something that is tube lights, maybe the old types of tube lights, maybe the old types of ballasts which are inefficient. You may also know that ballasts of the tube lights use a certain percentage of the energy. So if your tube light is say 40 watts, another 15 watts is probably consumed by the ballast, which you don't know. You're thinking you're using 40 watts, but no. So all these changes can be done. You can shift to a more efficient lighting system, which has a good output, a good lumen output on the surface so that students can read better, or classrooms can be better lit, libraries can be better lit, and so on. Also, you can change your fans from the traditional 60 watts, 65 watts, or 70 watts to something which is more efficient, like 35 watts. A brushless DC fan can be used, or you can change all your equipment. Today, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency provides star-rated equipments. If you go for 3 or 5-star rated equipment, they may cost a little bit more, but they are going to save you in the long run a lot of energy. So in terms of lighting, I just wanted to show you what are the considerations. One is what is the life of the light? What is the toxic effect? So when we look at some of these tubes, like fluorescent tube and compact tubes, there is one aspect that is a mercury. When it is disposed of, there is a mercury that is let into the dumping grounds or the landfills. Whereas if you use light emitting diodes and so on, you have no such effect. The rated life is also important. If it is 50,000 hours, like in the case of LED, then it is extremely good for you. And also the efficacy, what kind of efficacy, that is output to the input, how much it is giving you, is also very important. So you can see that light emitting diodes give you between the range of 60 to 76 watts, lumens per watt, which is very important. Here, I just want to show you, this may look like a complex chart, but I just want to demystify this. This is the energy performance index of a residential apartment, which, in different years it has been marked, and how by the introduction of various energy efficient equipment, you can reduce the energy performance index, which is the kilowatt hour per square meter per year. So from 144, which is a high number for a small apartment, you can see by the introduction of geysers, by the introduction of various energy efficient equipment, how the EPI can be brought down. And the same thing can be done in any space. And here, mind you, we have not replaced the geysers with, say, a solar thermal. If we do that, then this can come down to the range of 30 or 40 EPI, that is a kilowatt hour per square meter per year. So there is a lot of opportunity here. The last thing in this energy management that I want to talk about is the concept of being nearly zero energy buildings. We cannot be net zero. There are many reasons for that, because net zero is a good concept, but let's be fair, we can't be net zero, but nearly zero is possible. If you reach this benchmark of 15 kilowatt hour per meter square as defined by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, then you are, you can achieve this nearly zero energy building. That is, whatever is after making your building efficient, if you are able to introduce renewable energy in the balance, then you are able to reach that. And I think this is a target for many campuses can look at. If they have the funds or they are able to raise the funds, they should go for, and there are many schemes right now which allow for, for colleges without doing any investment to be able to introduce renewable energy. We can take that up later. An example of net zero energy building already exists, and I'm sure many of you know about it, but for those who don't know, our Paryavaran Bhavan is located in Delhi, is India's first net zero energy building. By designing it in a way that you have maximum amount, 75% of natural daylight in most of the spaces, and by introducing a rooftop solar which extends beyond the building has actually become net positive. That is, it is giving energy back to the grid. So this is the kind of vision that we need to have for energy management of buildings. The next thing that we can talk about is water management, and here what is important is self-reliance. So there are three aspects how we can be self-reliant in water. May not be possible in urban areas, but maybe we can give it a try. One is by doing rainwater harvesting, which is harvesting all the water that is falling within your compound, within your campus, and making the use of it either for recharging, either for using for non-domestic purposes and so on. And you can have recycling of water, either gray water or black water recycling within your campus if you have enough space, or just do gray cycling if there is not enough space, and then use water efficient equipment. Of course, there has to be a lot of awareness among the users to see that the use of the water efficient equipment is done properly. So rainwater harvesting can be done in two ways. One is you can store the water, for which you require lots of storage because you get only 4 months. Luckily, in the whole of India, almost we get 4 months of monsoon, 4 months of rain, which needs to be stored. The other option is to recharge the ground, and that is a better way mainly in urban areas because there is not enough space. Storage costs a lot. So we can do groundwater recharge. We have very little of space left, which is unpaved. So we are doing a good thing by putting it back. Of course, it requires a good amount of study, a geological investigation needs to be done. So there are different parts of rainwater harvesting. The catchment, that is whatever surface rain falls, whether it is the roof, whether it is the paved surface, whether it is the garden, these are all catchments. And from here, the rainwater can be collected into a storm water. So there are channels. So from your roof, you can collect it through the downtake pipes, and then it can go into somewhere. The third element that is required is a filter. So it can be either plugged into your downtake pipe or it can be introduced as a separate element. So it filters all the unnecessary elements. And then there is the last thing is groundwater recharge. Depending upon the kind of situation, there can be different types of groundwater recharge systems that we can introduce. Here are some case studies. We have done a lot of rainwater harvesting, both feasibility as well as actual implementation in the city of Mumbai and around. And here I want to show you the cases where they actually went for rainwater harvesting. For example, the left one, mainly because there was lack of rainwater and they were using rainwater, using tanker water, which costed them a lot of amount. Water efficient equipment can be used. So where possible, you can replace your taps with sensor based dual flush systems. Where you have a tall building and there is a pressure issue, we can put pressure regulating valves so that water is not wasted. You can use drip irrigation in your entire campus. So there are various water efficient equipment that can be used to minimize the use of water. And thirdly is the wastewater treatment. And I personally support the decentralized wastewater treatment systems, which are simple anaerobic and aerobic systems requiring a septic tank, a baffle tank reactor, a reed bed system, which uses natural aquatic plants. Through their roots, the waste gets oxygenated. The thing is, this kind of system is basically a natural system. It doesn't require mechanical energy to treat your waste. So where possible, where there is a space, this kind of system can be installed. It requires monitoring in the sense that to see the output quality, but it has a good efficiency as well and can be implemented. These are all examples courtesy of Nature Solutions, which are all reed bed treatment systems for both grey water recycling and black water recycling, which have been done, implemented in various parts of the country. So it's absolutely possible. So you may think this is a garden, but actually it's a water recycling system. So this is also another aspect. Now coming to the waste, solid waste, the whole vision can be that of making a zero waste campus. And I think this is absolutely doable. This requires, number one, waste segregation, which many of you probably are already doing. The second is to look at what to do with the organic waste, how best to treat it. And the third is to look at what to do with the recyclables. Now here again, I will talk about audit, but the characterization of the waste is important, knowing specifically what kind of waste. For example, if you have a fashion or a technology institute or something like that, there may be a lot of cloth waste, or if there is a food waste, or there is a predominantly paper waste, if it's an architecture or design or engineering college or something. So you have to be specifically seeing what kind of waste, and of course the student community needs to be involved in this as well. So e-waste is a big, huge thing, and it's not at all difficult to install e-waste systems. Connect yourself to a company which recycles e-waste, and put segregators everywhere, which not only is important, but it also communicates something to your student and your academic community. And you can, based on what kind of solutions you require, what kind of space you have, you can go for a decentralized organic waste management system. You can go even for biogas formation. You can go for vermicomposting, organic composting, and in very rare cases also electrical composting, which if there is lack of space or something like that. The next aspect is about pollution abatement. So you can check the air quality index within your campus, measure it. The noise factor in some campuses are close to railway lines or close to roads or something like that. So how do we make buffers in the campus? How do we improve the envelope of the building in order to reduce the noise? Or if there is a contaminated water body, how can it be within the campus? How can it be treated and made better? Indoor environment quality, there are many things that can be done, but here I have specifically shown you plants. It has been proven beyond all the research has clearly proved that having plants inside buildings not only helps in absorbing the volatile organic compounds and your other kinds of chemicals, but it also helps in overall moderating the temperature if you have enough number of plants inside your building. So these are also things. So you can have an entire assessment of your indoor environment quality, measure the carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and other chemicals, even VOCs, and you can improve it by using this. You can have a whole aspect of carbon footprint reduction. There are two things in carbon footprint. One is your energy consumption. So that is your major source of carbon emission for the campus. So whatever energy consumption in kilowatt hour in units is comes, and based on the source we can convert it into a carbon footprint and find out what is your carbon footprint, and then assess it and see how we can reduce it by, of course, mitigating, making energy efficient and using renewable energy and so on. Similarly, transportation. If you have a large campus, then do you use buses for transportation? Do you use a private mode of transportation? Do you have a railway station nearby, and so on? So are the factors. So how do you mitigate or offset this carbon footprint? You can do plantation of native trees. You can have an annual tree plantation program. You can introduce the concept called green walls, which can be inside the building. And for this, even the wastewater can be used. And of course, you can choose alternative modes of transportation. Another concept, and I think probably the last one, is vegetation and biodiversity. how you can enhance this within your campus. You can look about, you can design ecological zones. There are so many campuses I have visited, like in Hong Kong University. I saw this beautiful area of ecological and biodiverse area with all the nameplates. So community
Hello, hello,
public
Roshni madam.
hello.
Yes, madam. Your voice was not audible.
Okay. I hope it was just this.
Yes, yes. Just a minute ago. Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, can I continue?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Please continue.
Okay. So in campuses, how you can use the biodiversity? First of all, mapping biodiversity, the biodiversity, the different kinds of birds, and so on. Even in some kinds of things, like a greenhouse, food, for example, these can all be collaboration with the student and a long-term plan, ecological sustainability at campus. So these are the areas in which exists. I am just giving a brief idea of what can be done improving the biodiversity in your campus. Coming to the various criteria that exist. So in NAC number 7 talks about institutional value practices, in which these points, which for example talks about environment met by renewable sources. So it would for you here, if some source of renewability, maybe not large scale in the area given, you can start with thermal if you have a requirement water systems, or small areas maybe can be gone can be renewable energy. So you can start small.
Hello, Roshni madam. Excuse me, madam. You're not audible. Hello. Hello. Hello, Roshni madam. Hello. Problem is there. So she's trying in a minute. Thank you. Hello. Yes, yes, yes. I'll make you post. Yes.
Hello.
Yes, madam.
All the participants are requested to please put off your videos. Participants, please put off your videos. Maybe the bandwidth is getting low because of that.
Video.
Hello, Rushali madam, what is the problem?
Actually, Roshni ma'am is having problem, technical problem, network issue, I think. She has joined, but we are not able to hear.
Okay. Hello, Rushali madam.
Yeah, okay. So I'm now sharing my screen. Okay. Uh, I was at the NAC criteria. Sorry for the disruption. So the annual lighting power requirement that is met through LED can be mentioned. Waste management steps that you have taken, for example, in solid waste or water management or e-waste. These are very simple things which I have explained to you, which can be done. Rainwater harvesting structures and how you have utilized it in the campus for either watering the plants or for the reuse in the flushing system and so on. These are things that you can do, and you can get some points or credits for this. Other than that, it mentions about green practices. So here there can be a whole lot of green practices such as energy efficiency, making your campus low carbon, using renewable energy, improving the vegetation and biodiversity, and creating biodiverse spaces, providing pollution abatement, controlling the pollution, noise pollution, air pollution, and so on, and providing in indoor environment quality. So these are the various green practices, and there can be many more that can be done, especially one which involves the participants, the student community as well. The average percentage expenditure on green initiatives and waste management is also asked for. So all of this that you have done or you could do, you can mention about it. And lastly, it talks about differently abled. So this is about designing your campus for all. It's called universal design. So whether you are providing proper kind of access, size of the washrooms, etc., the accessibility, the doors for all kinds of people, including wheelchair access should be provided, and so on. So the process of green audit and benchmarking. So I'm just going to show you quickly the steps of conducting an environmental audit. The first step is to collect the historical data, which is already available with you. So we generally collect this data from an online procedure. And then there is some kind of walkthrough and screening survey that can be done, that is done. For with respect to energy audit, there are some surveys taken specifically from your people who are in charge, or who are in charge of various spaces, and the energy audit, water audit, solid waste audit, all of this data is collected. Later on, a detailed investigation and analysis process is done. And finally, the documentation and the reporting is done. So this is the process of an environmental audit. I just want to show you energy audit, what kind of methodology we use. So step one, audit of historical data, review of bills, building drawings. Step two is screening, survey, walkthrough data, which includes all the survey and measurements. And then you can do visual thermal comfort and usage. You can do measurements. And this is a step three. After these three steps are done, we gently do data analysis, and the step five is documentation report. The same process is followed for water and waste audit, and for the other two as well. So these are the instruments, some of the instruments that are used in energy audit. The last part of the green campus is feasibility, compliance, and commissioning. So here you can see that the analysis is first done. So this is the feasibility. If you look at all sorts of data, you have a lot of data, but now to analyze and see, see this data. So for example, how much of your ACs are rated or non-rated, and what kind of lighting annual energy consumption, how much of it is with fluorescent lamps, how much it is LED, or how much of your energy consumption is by ACs and fans and lights. So this kind of separation of data is done. Similarly, billing analysis includes energy consumption in kilowatt hours, how it has been over the years, by what addition or alteration, how it has moderated the EPI. Now this is a benchmarking. So EPI, for example, is a benchmarking given by Bureau of Energy Efficiency, so kilowatt hour per square meter per year. So this you can compare with your institutional EPI and see. Similarly, there is something called specific energy consumption, how much energy per person or how much amount of cost you consume per person for electricity. These are all different benchmarking things. Similarly, for lighting, you can see what is the lighting power density that is given by the standards ECBC, and how much is your, where do you stand in that. That kind of analysis is done. Similarly, for visual comfort, we do this testing using a lux meter. So, in the last column, you can see how much of your spaces actually match with the National Building Code. Do they match or not match? And if not, then what needs to be done? So this is done using a lux meter in any space, random space, about different points are taken and done. Similarly, whether your lighting visual comfort is as per the standards given by the NBC or not. So in general, all of these analysis after the audit is done is based on standards and benchmarks, for which we follow the National Building Code, in which Chapter 11 of the new National Building Code 2016 talks specifically about sustainability. Besides that, the Energy Conservation Building Code is addressed. And lastly, we also look at the EPI range that is given under Bureau of Energy Efficiency. So in feasibility, compliance, and commissioning, we talk about replacement. So here, for example, we give you, if your existing system is X, say twin fluorescent tube lights, and this is a more efficient, two tube lights, twin fluorescent tube lights, but these are with LEDs or 18 watts, two different ones which are more T8s or which are more efficient. So on the left, you will see in the table, there is something that is total cost and total annual savings in terms of kilowatt hours, annual savings in rupees, and what is your simple payback period. So in this way, a feasibility will be given for each and every aspect. So energy audit, this is how it is done. For all the different aspects, it will be done. Similarly, rainwater harvesting. A rainwater harvesting plan can be designed for the whole campus or can be done for the whole campus. What would be the cost? What are the different components? So maybe the college decides to do one of the many things in the first year, or decides only to do rainwater harvesting in the first year. So all of these can be done in phases. For example, here is a report of energy audit, the various steps that one can take. So here in the end, the payback period is given in the last column, and the cost is given. So you can see that there is an initial cost, capital investment, and it gives you, by saving of your electricity bill, how much will be your simple payback. So annual energy savings and simple payback is given. So that is where the college can decide which action to take and how to take it, and how to take it in a phase-wise manner. So that is all about the process, that is green audit, feasibility, commissioning, what is done. Once you do a green campus, monitoring, training, and capacity building is also an important aspect. So training, so maybe doing one or two training workshops every year for all the faculty, students can be an option, or can be done. Involvement of the students through monitoring and reporting, maybe consumption, and there can be some innovative ways by which this can be done through communication boards, through apps, and so on. There can be incentives to students, research can be done, and awards can be given to various classes for maintaining a good energy efficiency or something. And there have to be people identified in the campus as eco champions. Maybe they are coordinators, maybe they are student leaders, maybe they are staff leaders, maybe they are academicians, and eco clubs, which many of you already have. All these things can be linked together. Lastly, I just want to leave you with this one slide, which is related to a campus in Tel Aviv. It is Tel Aviv University Potter School. The reason I'm showing you this campus is it's a small campus, but yet it has been able to do a lot of things. For example, the facade comprises of, vacuum, solar vacuum pipes, which actually provide passive ventilation to the entire building, so it avoids the air conditioning system. Then it has solar panels on the facade. It has a roof with a garden on the roof. It has its own treatment for the toilet water that comes out. You can see in front of the building they have a waste treatment facility. All the furniture that is used is basically recycled. So a lot of things have been done consciously to make the campus into a green campus. So I wanted to leave you with this last example. And with that, I think I've come to the end of my presentation. And I'm extremely sorry for the disruptions that have taken place. It was unexpected. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, madam, for such an informative and enlightening session on making a green campus in different aspects. Really deep insights, madam. So with your kind permission, can we move to question and answer session?
Yes, yes. Shall I stop sharing the screen now?
Yes, yes, ma'am. So first question is, what do you mean by green campus? One of the participant has asked.
Okay, you want me to answer that right now?
Or maybe should I ask another question? If you want to.
So I think I have already addressed.
Yeah, you have already.
Was about a green campus. So basically, there is no, I mean, as such definition. You can make your own version of the green campus. The basic components I have included: water management, energy management. These are the things I've included, and you can, have even more than this. So go beyond this. Make your campus into net zero energy, net zero waste. So the more you do, the more sustainable you make your campus, the more green it will be.
Okay. Madam, what can be done for heritage structures where modifications can't be made?
Well, the structure itself, you cannot make much changes. So, for example, I was giving the example of in Churchgate, the cement house. So that is a heritage structure. So it went for a green rating, and it also went for a environment energy rating. And today it is a proper BE rated, star rated structure. They did not do any modification to the external of the building, but within the structure they can make changes. And outside, if it's a campus, you can do a lot of changes. You can do rainwater harvesting. There's no damage to the structure.
Okay. And is it advisable to go for rainwater harvesting where the campus often gets flooded during rainy season?
Yes, I would say that rainwater harvesting is actually a method of mitigating. Floods often happen when there is no outlet for the rainwater, and rainwater harvesting actually implies that you are making ways by which the rain either gets absorbed or gets used in some way inside the campus. So yes, definitely, wherever there is a flooding, you must look at the option of rainwater harvesting or some other technique by which you're flooding. Yes, definitely you can do it, but it involves also looking at your geological strata, whether there is a hard rock or whatever. A proper geotechnical investigation needs to be done.
Okay. And ma'am, what is the role of an architect in creating green campus?
If you're going for a new campus, then definitely you can ask an architect to design it as per these parameters. That is, waters are recycled and so on and so forth, and do many things. But even after that, even if your current building is there, you can have architects and consultants like architects who are into green buildings to address the various issues and to make your campus zero waste and zero energy and so on. So all of these things can be addressed by the architects, including your building envelope also can be assessed. For example, you can look at what is the window to wall ratio, whether lighting is proper or not, and how it can be enhanced if it is not proper.
Okay. Does NAC require energy audit to be done by specific recognized agencies? Any mention?
Generally, I mean, it doesn't mention, but generally speaking, the energy audit is preferred to be done by a certified energy auditor, a certified energy auditor from the Bureau of Energy Efficiency.
Yes, yes. Uh, and madam, does terrace gardening affect roof of the building, and does it increase cooling?
Uh, yes, it definitely will help in reducing the heat load of the building. See, the horizontal surface, that is the terrace, is the place where you get the maximum amount of radiation. So if you have some sort of plants or a garden or a lawn, it will definitely reduce the heat entering inside the building, and therefore your energy consumption will be reduced. Whether it will affect your building itself, you need to take care of it. Because buildings are generally designed for certain, the terrace is not meant to, water is not supposed to come in from the terrace. So when you
Okay.
make a lawn or a garden on the roof, make
Mhm.
sure that you are making it waterproof.
Okay. Okay, madam. And what is wheeling to the grid?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
One of the participant has asked, what is wheeling to the grid?
Willing to the grid, I did
Grid.
not get.
Okay, we'll take another question, ma'am. What is the cost of electronic composting machine?
Well, there is a lot of variation in that between, I think from what I know, it depends upon also the capacity. So between, I think from what I know of the market, between a lakh of rupees to it can go to any amount. But you will have to really connect with one of these vendors and find out if, how much waste you have, first of all, and then whether that waste can be treated using, whether you need to use, I mean, I would not recommend electrical composting, but
Okay.
in case where there is absolutely no space,
Hmm.
and then you can go for these machines, but they will consume electricity. So
Yes.
you can find out, but there's a range, higher range is there between 1.5 or 1 lakhs and above is the range
Okay.
generally. Yes.
Okay. Madam, can you guide students for conducting internal water audit so that they can also learn saving water while doing audit? Do you conduct such type of programs?
We can do that, yes, definitely, because I think that unless you involve students,
Mhm.
there will not be a good result. So uh, I think that definitely we can help colleges if they want any support in terms of
Conducting such
giving some
programs.
guidelines or something like that for students, or programs for students where they
Okay.
can take it up every year.
Right. Yeah. Madam, what is the approximate cost range of conducting green audit and energy audit?
Uh, Well, it depends. There are different types of audits. There is a simple audit, the kind that I showed you, involves the methodology I showed you for an energy audit is a detailed audit, and that is more towards
Last
something
का
where
5 मिनट
will depend upon 2.5 rupees per square feet to 6 to 7 rupees per square feet, and so on, for various types of audits. But there is a simple way also. We do conduct these online surveys which require minimum amount, so can be done within the range of 25 to 30,000 and involves a few visits. and then the report can be done. But a majority of the information has to be supplied by the institute in the required format. We do have
Okay.
what is required. You will have to supply most of the information to us.
Right. Okay. Madam, can biomimicry be the future and an important factor to play role in Green Campus? Do we see it possible in India in upcoming years?
It's an interesting question. I thought that an architect could ask that question. Biomimicry can be introduced. It can be, I don't see it happening much in India, but definitely making buildings like I showed you in the beginning, these buildings which are self-regulating, passive buildings, the scope for biomimicry is definitely there. We should have more and more students, architectural students, going towards this. So yes, biomimicry can be done in new buildings. Specifically, there is a lot of scope to make buildings which are truly on their own, that are self-reliant organisms kind of thing, which are completely self-sustainable systems. So yes.
Okay. Madam, one of the participant has asked that her college is near national highway. So, which practices should be implemented to make the campus green and nature friendly?
I think all of the things that we have mentioned within the campus, of course, solid waste and water management and many of the things can be done. But being next to the national highway, I think tree plantations and maybe controlling noise through proper buffering, dust control, these are things that they can think of. And in the buffer spaces between the road and the campus itself, there can be tree plantation, biodiversity enhancement, and things like that. So, and of course, other things like rainwater harvesting, water management, all of those things can be done. But next to the highway, meaning some kind of things related to protection from the transportation pollution, air pollution, and so on, can be thought of.
Yes, definitely. Madam, with the change you have suggested, will there be impact on insect and birds or other parts of food web chain?
Change in?
Will there be any impact on insect and birds and other part of food web with all these changes?
There should be, I suppose, a positive impact.
Yes,
If
positive
any.
impact
Yeah,
will be
because if for example, if we pay more attention to the kind of trees, for example, you may have a campus which looks very green, but
yes.
not actually be supporting many birds and insects. So
Mhm.
giving a thought to the right kind of trees that you can plant, or the right kind of ground cover, or the right kind of vegetation, or even the terraces, etc. Even a small little effort can increase the number of animals and birds that visit your campus. So you will be surprised that even with a small thing, small intervention can lead to good positive, definitely positive changes that can take place.
Yes. Madam, can we use canteen wastewater for groundwater recharge? What prior treatment is required in this?
Not for groundwater recharge, but see, there's something called gray water. That is mainly coming from waste of your bathroom waste, like your washing dishes, your sinks, and so on. This does not have a huge pollution load, and it can be treated by means of a very small filter, like an oil and grease trap can be introduced. You can have a small sort of filter for removing the soaps and the surfactants, and that's it. Then it can be used for the watering the trees and plants. It will provide good nutrition to your plants. For example, many places you must have seen where there is no municipal system for treating water. Usually in the backyard there are banana plants or things like that which grow. So usually people leave their wastewater like that. So canteen waste can be used for not for recharging. Recharging ground requires a lot of thought because it goes deep into the aquifers. So proper recharging plan should be done. It can be done, no doubt, but it is easier and better advisable to use this wastewater from canteen for watering your plants or for generally landscaping.
Okay. Madam, can solar net metering be done in societies having terrace?
Solar net metering, I think, can be done. As per the current policy, I think that almost 80% of that energy requires to be used by the building itself. There is some clause in the net metering policy. I think
Yes.
there are some buildings which have gone. I know in Mumbai also, in Bhandup or someplace they have done rooftop solar. They have taken a loan and they know that the payback is not much, but I think net metering is possible, and for majority of the time of the year you can use that because we have a good amount of radiation throughout.
Yes. Madam, do you take students for internship in their fourth sem, like MSc in environmental science students, for example?
We can, yes, we can take them. We haven't yet considered
Uh-huh.
non-architecture students, but we can consider to take them for we can give them projects, yes,
Okay.
especially which can be related to energy audits and so on. Yes, we can definitely involve them.
Yes. Okay. Madam, this green campus is possible in desert area. Is this possible? And can we do for that people who are living in the sandy area?
Yes, yes, absolutely possible. All of the aspects.
Okay.
There is less rain over there, but whatever rain is there, if you will be surprised that the best rainwater harvesting systems are all located in deserts.
Oh,
Step wells, most of the old houses had a central glow, which they had water storage. So there is nothing that cannot be done in these areas, and desert areas have the additional benefit of solar radiation, so they can put up solar
yes.
panels as well.
Right. Okay, madam. Madam, I think we are finished with the questions. I'll hand over charge to Farida, madam. Madam, please.
Just a minute,
Yes,
Vishali madam.
yes,
Some
yes.
two people have raised their hand. If they have anything to ask, let them.
Okay,
Can
okay.
I give?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll
Uh,
unmute them. Hello, Mr. Pundalik, sir.
Hello,
Hello.
madam.
Hi, yes, sir.
Uh, are there any healthy suggestions to sarpanchas in Maharashtra to get water harvesting for their villages?
Yes, in villages there is already different schemes. Like for example, there is a scheme of making a small talab. So already the groundwater board of government of Maharashtra, for example, I know has a scheme of providing shet tal. So they also fund part of this, and some part of the labor has to be paid for by the gram panchayat or something like that. But basically, there are these schemes of rainwater harvesting. So depending upon the terrain and hydrology, etc., if they identify a space where the pond can be done, then there is already a government scheme to support this kind of thing. So this is for villages, rainwater harvesting can be done at this kind of level.
Madam, what is the present status of water harvesting in rural areas?
I'm not really aware to give you the clear situation, but I know that in a lot of places, like in Aurangabad, I had visited long back, where watershed management practices were done and yielding very good results. In many places, Shetal has also been done. I wouldn't say that all the villages 100% are aware of all of these things and are doing it, but in many places, I have seen that small structures, recharge structures have been taken up. But village being such a huge scope, there is a lot of scope for further work in this area, I would say.
Thank you, madam.
Okay, thank you, sir. Rajeshwari, madam, you want to ask the question? Hello?
I think Vrishali madam, it's okay now. We should wind up.
Okay, madam.
Roshni madam, it was a wonderful session. It was really really guided us towards NAC, and not only NAC. Let us forget NAC, but really the need of an hour that we need to protect our environment. So it went very well. Definitely, we would take your guidance for making our campus green. I would just like to ask you one thing, that ours is a very old building and flooded many a times. So whether it is possible to make structural changes in that building?
Structural changes are not recommended in old building. Depends, of course, upon the quality or of the status of the building, how it is, whether it is structurally stable or not. We need to test that. And if it is an old building, I would not advise. But certain things like light ventilation can be looked at, because that is involving windows, and you can definitely do changes in the kind of glazing you are using, or introducing light windows. These are things that can be done even in old buildings. And rainwater harvesting also you can do. So these are things you can definitely do in old buildings.
Can we have skylarks like in an old building? Our building is like now it is very dark. We cannot go without the lighting. So can we have skylarks? I stay in a home where we have introduced skylark because it was a straight structure. So to have a light in the whole area, we have introduced skylark in our bungalow. So can we have such type of thing can be done with my college also?
I think one would need to visit
visit
and see the
see.
site, and then based on that give suggestions whether it is possible or not. Definitely we can see that.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you so much. It was really nice hearing you. It went so nicely. Minor technical, I think technical issue proves that the session is excellent. That is what I can say. A minor disturbance is always expected, and technology is something which is not in our hand. Thank you, everyone. Roshni madam, once again, a hearty thanks for your wonderful session. Vishali madam, can you take over? Farida madam, can you
Yes.
take?
Yes, Farida madam, over to you, please. Hello?
Hello, Roshali madam. This is Dr.
Yes.
Savita Punjabi for the vote of
Yes.
thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
At the outset, I wish you all a happy World Environmental Day. As said by Keith Davis, what is this poor life if full of care? We have no time to stand and stare. So the time has come to rethink, redesign our campuses and reconnect with nature. At least COVID-19 has made us to learn this lesson and to remind it again and again. With these words, I take your permission to end up the program by a formal vote of thanks. I'm really thankful to Dr. Roshni for her valuable inputs shared on creating a green campus. Really, it was an informative session, a real eye-opener. I hope all the authorities who have joined, they will now think about redesigning and revamping the college campus to more green and eco-friendly manner with scientific principles. Thank you, ma'am. Really a wonderful session. I'm also thankful to our in-charge principal, the captain of our ship, as I always say, Dr. Neetu Kapoor, for arranging such programs. I'm thankful to management for the constant motivation as the backbone for every program. I'm thankful to our ICRACY coordinator and program in charge, Mrs. Farida Kukuliwala, and her team, including Professor Gopal Chanchlani, for all their ceaseless efforts. I'm thankful to Rushali Kulkarni for technical assistance throughout the program, working as a moderator from starting to the end. Thanks to our alumni, Diksha Jadhav, for the digital flyer she has made for all of us. Thanks to all the participants from various colleges across the nation for being a wonderful audience. Even after that technical glitch, all of us were there for the program. Thank you everyone on and off the screen. My takeaway from the session is scientific ways can really help us to reduce the cost and save the nature. So let us respond to the theme of the day, that is time for nature call, else we will have to add on to our worries and woes. So friends, I will end up with these 4 lines. Open lit classes, pollution-free campus, tree plantation, no plastic zone, all actions rethought with positive effect on nature, reduce diseases and increase happiness, foster creativity and be the creators of future and be the creators of future. So let us ensure that when we move back to our physical colleges, we work as eco champions and form the eco clubs and move towards the green campuses, as green is the word for prosperity and creativity. So thank you everyone. Thank you for joining us and motivating us with your presence. Thank you.